Welcome to Carolina Sculpture Studio. My name is Clint Button, and I'm a granite sculptor. Welcome to video number 114 of the Virtual Stone Carving Apprenticeship. Okay, I'm still trying to understand how I'm going to take much video of me shooting points because it's really tedious and it's really hard to, it pretty much goes back to what I showed you on the last video in the Apprenticeship series. When I swipe, and there's a mark there. What's going to happen is that you have to, there's no shortcut or no easy way to get around doing it. It's a real long, slow process. Sometimes you can expedite it a little bit. Now, we talked about measuring down here from, on the model, from the register on the top, down to where the point on her wing is that I want to shoot, that I got a screw in there for a foundation point. It's really beneficial when you start shooting to have a point from the bottom, a point from the top, and a point from the side, one way or the other, whether you're going whichever direction you're going. And I've got a point on her knee, so that's a relatively, that's up in the center third of her figure, and I can use that for any point that I'm shooting in this direction. Say I'm going to take and I'm going to come one up from the bottom and one from the top, and then I can go from here to use as my third one. The problem is that really is ineffective if I'm shooting other points up on the top. So what would work better would be to have that point on her wing, which I mentioned is down in this area here. We got to take all this stone out. When you start measuring and taking out, like I talked, we can measure from the top, go down a certain distance, go in a certain distance, and then have that placed in some relationship to the center line that we're working from. That gets into the other methods of enlargement. You're doing the same kind of thing where people just kind of measured and did what they needed to do, and you get into the, either the Canova or the Alberti style, when you've got a frame around something and you're dropping pendant lines. You use a plumb line, plumb bob, I guess is what it's called, a pendant line, and then you measure straight in, and then you have to somehow figure that calculation out as to exactly how deep you go. Okay? You do it on a triangle real easy with compass. You're just not swinging the compasses from a point like I'm doing here to go directly to that point. You measure down from a frame, and you go over an inch and down 18 inches, and then you go in a certain distance. And that's one way to do it, but to calculate that dimension of where you're going in, that can be any dimension. It's not going to be just exactly 6 inches or 3.5 inches, or even if you want to do it in millimeters and do it metric, so it's easier to do the math. You still got to figure out what that calculation is, and the most accurate way to do it is to swing the compasses on a triangle. Just set up, based upon your calculation, or if you're gonna go in, you're just doubling or tripling it, you can walk the calipers down and then stretch them, and you don't have to do any math. That's the whole benefit of learning how to use compasses properly. They're not just something where you hold it up to the dimension and go, okay, now I'm going to put that on the job, because that can exist here or here or here or here. You have no way of knowing that that's in the exact right place. By doing it through triangulation like I'm doing it, this is how these are really effective. But to hog off stone here, I'm going to take a measurement, as I've done, from this on the model, from the top line. I'm going to measure down. I'm going to figure that on the triangle, expand it, apply it. I'm going to measure in. I'm going to do that on the triangle and apply it. And then I'm going to measure approximately how far raised it is off the background. Because we've got a static background on this piece of stone, we know that this 8-inch, the die face of the die portion, that's supposed to be 8 inches, and we can get a pretty good idea of where that's going to be. We'll cut that as we go. But we're not going to worry much about that 8-inch dimension. As far as behind it right now, I've got a little bit of wiggle room in that. I think it's like 8 1/4, maybe 8 1/2, just a little bit oversized. But I won't define that plane until later on in the project. Something that's very different about this job, and this is more of an issue with stone or granite versus marble. Normally when we do a large, full-size, life-size, whatever, figure, a man, a woman, whatever, we'll get a piece of granite that's got what's called head-on-end grain, okay? And that means that the run and the rift are on the vertical sides of the stone, either the front and back or the two sides. You got the run one way and the rift the other way. And then the grain's going straight up and down, just like a board, just like a piece of wood, okay? I've mentioned this before many times. This is head on end, okay? The head grain is here on top, here on the bottom. And that means that this is really strong in terms of not breaking. And so normally when we get a statue, a piece of stone for a statue, we'll specify head-on end grain granite. Now with marble's metamorphic, so it's been kneaded up like bread dough. So it doesn't have a grain structure like granite does. And so you can just get a piece of marble, and as long as you don't have problems with inclusions or cracks, it's just a piece of marble. You can cut it whatever way you want because the grain's all noodled up like dough. So it's not going to break like this. The difference with this stone, and this is limited as to how the stone is quarried, because the stone is usually quarried in a manner that limits it's usually quarried where the head grain is on a long side like this, instead of it being on the end. And so you're limited to the dimension through, because the grain is going like this instead of going like this. And then because the quarry is pulled in it's cut in a certain process in a certain manner is how they schedule the cut. They usually don't go beyond a certain dimension for the head grain. So if you want something more than about 5 feet tall, a lot of times you got to get a special block, and you got to pay bucks for it, and I mean money. In order to do this project and keep it in budget, the grain in this stone, this is the head, okay? This is the way the grain is going in this block of granite. Right now we're looking at the head grain. What that means is that when you're carving a normal piece of head-on-end grain statuary and you're roughing this stone off, you're taking stone off, that it will fracture vertically, but it's very strong going through, so you don't have a weak spot with the head that'll break off. If you've got, depending on how you compose it, detail can be a much stronger, much more durable. But you always think about ankles, feet. That's why you have a bollard, a little knob or support or trunk or broken column or something for accessory. A lot of times by one leg that'll web it up to the knee or more. So you've got strength there, added strength, so it doesn't snap off. On granite, you want the grain going vertical, because if it's going through something like that, it's still going to be weak. It's not as much of a problem with weakness on this stone, because we're going to keep an 8-inch die behind it. This is just like me carving a regular die. And that was just a concession to get this stone, to keep it under budget, make sure everything was going to work. But I got to remember, normally I could cut this in and I could break like this. If I saw it in here, I could just snap this off. I can't break across that head grain. It'll break this way really good, but if I hit it hard, it could break and it could fracture and cause a problem in here. I don't want to do that. So you've got to be careful working this. And this will also, when you're doing a statue, you've got head-on-end grain stone, it carves faster. This is going to carve slower because I got to cut across the grain. It's not going to split off as easy. Some ways it will split, but I've got to be careful that I don't go into the background or blow a side off when normally you're in you've done a statue before, you've done many statues before, and you're used to being able to handle it in a certain way, and now you got to slow down, stop, and remember, this isn't like a normal statue. This is like a great big die carving. So anyways, I'm gonna rough this in some. I'm gonna double check these measurements, swing compasses, make sure I'm where I'm at. I'm gonna rough this in, and I'll try to get some video as I approach this point to show you how to shoot this point, because this one, you know, I don't want to say we glossed over the first point, but it was only, you know, a quarter inch, not even a half an inch of stone to take off, so there really wasn't much of scrubbing because it was right up near the top. So let me swing some compasses, and I'll be back, and we'll try to get some pictures. I gotta saw this up, work this up, and I'll get this down, and then I'll try to show you the progression of how the swipes come together, using point from the head, point from the bottom, and point from her knee to get 3 that are crossed. Okay? Be back in a little bit. As I start marking this, I'm going to put my line here for 8 inches all the way down, and the square is still set. And I cut a little notch in the end of my square years ago, because then you can put a pencil in there, and you can, you know, you got to be careful about dragging it and eroding it. But then you can put a pencil in the end, you get a pretty accurate line to drag it right down the side, or to mark a few spots wherever you want to go. Before you, if you're lucky enough to have some real compasses, okay, and I got an assortment of them. Most of them came when I bought Dario's gear when he retired, because I didn't have any. And we talked about them some in earlier videos, and how to make your beam compasses and all that stuff. A lot of these Italian composite, they have a finger joint. And I don't know if that'll focus to where you can see, but there's several fingers in that joint that all mesh between each other. And they usually have a brass shim washer between them. And what happens is these wear, is that brass washer sometimes will start to poke out, and it'll cut you like a razor blade, and you'll bleed everywhere, and that ain't good. Sometimes you get them, and I've got some where they've taken a hammer and they beat on them to try to tighten them up. What'll happen is you'll use these in a certain range, like all the time. Like this one might be really comfortable between here and here. And then after that, to go smaller, it may not move smooth, or you may have a gap. Anywhere in them, you can have this gap where they just kind of just fall. And you've got to work around that, because they've got to maintain consistent pressure, so they maintain a consistent dimension. You'll also have them where they'll open up and then they'll just kind of stick, and you got to really pull to open them up. If you want them to last a long time, don't fight them, because if it doesn't open and close smoothly outside of a certain range, I don't use it outside that range. It just isn't worth it. Now, these are really nice. They're not common in terms of used equipment. You don't just find them at the local yard sale very often. They do pop up, but they're expensive. If you don't have these, you can make your beam compasses. And it's very easy. You take your 2 ends, and now you got a compass. And it's not quite as ideal. You can bend these a lot more. Put the right nut and bolt on there and tension it the way you want it. You may want to put a couple shims to have it smooth. But this is one of the things, is you can make these. You don't have to spend the money for these fancy ones. The ones that I wanted to make for years, I just never got there. I don't know if they were Gary's or Andy's, but there was one, and they were made out of like just just quarter-inch steel. And they had an end that was shaped a lot like this, but then they had that was cut out like that, and there was a big piece of brass that was riveted on each side, so the other one could slip inside of it. And those were the smoothest. They were perfect. They had such great tension, and they had such great movement. I loved them. They were the ones I always used. And I wanted to make a set like that, and it's just one of those things that hasn't happened. But you can make your own compasses, you know, bend them more, you know, you can heat them and bend them carefully, or you can get some stuff cut out. You may want to get it cut a little bit heavier, you know, if you're doing it, and get it out of, you know, I don't know, 1/4 inch is a lot. You got to draw them down a lot. It's up to you. You can make your own. It's a lot of satisfaction when you make your own tools and go to work. But these are just, you know, the way Andy showed me in the shed, you'd get a bunch of old wore out squares, like this old worn out one out of the shed that's all rounded off, and just cut it up and make you some beam compasses, and they work great. So, but I'm going to mark all of this because remember, the reason we cut this face is because this right here was really easy to produce. We had this reference, and we're fixing to wipe out 99% of that reference down the whole stone. And so this is going to be left over, and it will end up becoming very important real estate because we'll have this here to keep track of everything else we're doing. And so mark it well, and mark past the end of the stone around onto the end if you can. That's what I'm going to do, so I've got a good reference and I know where I'm at, and then try to get an idea of how far up from the back it is, because once we lose this, you know, we're still going to have this up here as long as I can leave it. But once we start cutting this off, because we're going to cut down into this pretty face, I'm about 2 inches up, and this point on the wing is literally right on the top of that. So I've got to cut down this far. I've got to cut out an area about like this, and I want to stay up so I don't cause problems. And I'll measure into where her elbow is. I'll go straight in to make sure that I don't go too far and waste that off. Think ahead, okay? So I'll work this in and we'll be back in a minute. This is my wing nut wrench. Okay, looks good on my shirt there. Okay, this is what I use on my compasses to loosen or tighten, and it works really, really well. It's easier than using a pair of pliers. We always use pliers, and I thought that was dumb, so I made one. But it will fit. See if I can hold that the right way. This will fit right on there, and there's a hole drilled. See, it just goes right on, and it fits pretty well. There's a hole drilled in the center so that, and you may have to drill the hole bigger depending on how long your bolts are. It fits my bolt really well. I drilled a 1/2 inch hole here, and then a hole just under that on each end, and then just sawed it out and filed it smooth, and I just put a little hole in it so I can hang it on my thing. Use this just constantly. Another homemade shop tool that goes so well with a beam compass. Just, they're great. So make you a wing nut wrench or a couple of them so you don't lose them and figure out what you got to do. This is just 1/4 inch steel, and just a piece of scrap. It was all rusty, and now I'm honoring it by putting it to good use to do fancy sculpture instead of throwing it in the scrap. So keep working. After some careful measuring, this is what I've got. This is approximately where the nail on her wingtip, on her feather is, right here. I measured straight into the elbow. That's this line up here, okay? And so I'm gonna stay an inch back from that so I can point that and swing that in, make sure that that's good. There's nothing else close in there. We got plenty of room, but we're gonna take out a piece of stone that's like 6 inches square. We're gonna take a cube of stone out of there that's 6 inches square, and it's gonna go down to, you know, I don't know if I'll quite go 6, but this is 2 inches up. The point should be at this level, so I'm going to stay up at least 1/2 inch. So I'll go a solid 5 inches down and then 6 inches in and 6 inches across, and that'll be a big chunk of stone. This will probably be the most digging that we'll have to do for quite a while, because once we get this off, then we'll have a place to break to, and we'll be able to advance up and down the stone along her side, along the elbow. You know, we can do this, and then we can swing from that to go in to the side of her body as we need to. That'll be more effective for this upper portion, and then we'll use the point on her knee to swing down to go along her leg to do that area, and it should work really well. But this will be, I just got to start sawing this, and this is scary stuff. You've got to really double check and triple check and pay attention to where you're at, because we're going to whack a big chunk of stone out of there, and then after we get down, then we'll start working on getting careful. I did mark my approximate crosshairs on here. I went this line through here. That's where the nail is, the screw is on her. And then this is also where the screw is. This should be my point right here, and it should be down right about here. So after we rough this out, I'll make sure I keep those lines drawn on this, so I got a good idea on where I'm supposed to be. And then we'll try to swing this and show you as these points come together, how they draw together to meet. All right, time to make some stone dust. I'll just keep going. As I saw this in, I tried to make it big enough that I could fit my small saw in here to do a lot of the work. When you break this out, remember the grain's going up and down, vertical. So it's going to break hard that way or that way, but it'll break easy up and down. If you put a handset on this stuff, this is usually how when you break out a niche on a regular bas-relief on the face of the die. You'll saw these in, you'll break them, and you'll have these tall, well, it'll break down, and you'll end up with this little sharp point in the middle where the handset, because what the handset does is it provides a way to initiate a break, okay, with this square edge, and then the flat edge makes good contact to transfer your energy into the stone. So you start the break, hit, and then you can tip it a little bit and then hit it and put all the energy into the stone so it doesn't crush the stone. This is something I'm doing with a chisel because I've got more control with the blade of a chisel than I do with the point of a hand point. But when I'm roughing stuff out like this is one of the times where carbide isn't necessarily my favorite tool, because the carbide tool can be very sharp, but it's very thick. This is a tool steel chisel. See the difference in profile? And so I've got a lot better ability to get into a tight space and not foul it to where it ramps out on the bevels, or I waste money grinding this back to make it skinny enough so that it actually hits, and then I spend all my money, I don't get anything out of the carbide because I ground it down. This won't sharpen as much, but it'll stay in shape. It'll have a rounded edge, but it'll hold its form a whole lot longer. And so now I can take and I'll work this down and just keep cutting. And then I can work one side off and work the other side off. But I don't have the problems with the tool ramping out as much. And I've also got a splitter. If we were doing a big statue, the way Gary did, he had a saw that cut about, 5 inches deep, had a big saw with water on it, whatever, diamond saw. And we put a bunch of saw cuts on, and just like I'm doing here, except they were bigger. And then we take a splitter that was tool steel. Same thing, go right down the base of the cut and just initiate it on both sides and snap it right off. And that's how you waste all this stone off. But sometimes a tool steel chisel will be far superior in use than a carbide tip chisel. Okay, so if you can have both of them, you'll have opportunities where one shines and the other one doesn't. So back to cutting. All right, got a hole here I'll cut out. And there's a pencil here somewhere. But now I can take and transfer my lines, this line here, and this line down, and this line down, and put an X right in here. A lot of times when you lose your pencil like this, you'll find it on the ground. While you're breaking stuff out like this, and this is more of that, you know, should be common sense, but you may not have been told that. Think about what could go wrong. If you're breaking something and you put your hand like that and you strike and you miss, you got your hand right there between it and the stone, okay? You're a lot smarter to hold your tool like this so that if you miss, you don't want to break the stone anyways. You got to be careful about that. But you have to put your hand there to be a target, because if you put your finger or your hand, you know, a lot of times you'll be going and you'll go fast, you'll be near an edge and you'll hit like this. You'll just get just enough of an off strike that it'll pressure your thumb or your finger, and it really hurts. And then the danger is that this finger, when I'm carving, that's my forward finger. That's the finger that's near my tools. If you carve like this, you carve upside down, it's your pinky. And if you do anything to injure either one of those two fingers to where they'll bleed, it's really hard to carve and keep them taped up so you don't bleed on the stone. So just think about that. We don't have to evacuate this back corner out completely because we're going to take this off anyways, so we just need this forward area cleared up. But now I'm going to start swinging compasses. I'm going to axe this up some here in a minute. We'll put some stuff on. I'll take some points. I'm going to get 3 measurements off my model, swing them, enlarge them, capture them with new compasses, and be back and we'll see how this swipes. I don't think there's enough time on this video to finish up this point. I want to show you how it progresses and not try to rush it in or overlook it, because I want to show you towards the beginning how this comes together. Made good progress, sawed that in. It's a good way to start this up, and now we'll have, now we could take, we could put a point on the side down here. We could have put a screw in, we could have left it tall, you know, down here where this red line is, you know, down here, that's going to be the side of the die. We could have put a point on there. We could have left a proud spot, you know, stay up a certain amount, and then shot that point on, just had that point here, shot it on, you know, put it on the model and shoot it on here before we cut all this. Or you can even put a pad and stick it on here. You can, if you've got your surface and it isn't perfect, you can put enough of a prick, just a little divot that'll hold your compass, and then axe it off later. And you know, a lot of times if you look carefully on plinths of some jobs that were probably pointed, you know, like in the cemetery, and you got a full round statue and there's a plinth. Sometimes when the light's just right and you're looking at the axing, you know, and you can see all the tool marks where they've axed it, sometimes you can see there's one little dip right there, and it's in one corner, and you look and there's a corresponding one on the other corner of the plinth, because those were foundation points. You know, ideally you won't be able to see them, but you know, if you know where to look, a lot of times they're right there. Glad I got a chance to mention, to compare and contrast tool steel versus carbide. I've got several pairs. I've got a tool steel point. I've got a carbide point, and I got a carbide chisel that I use a lot. I got a tool steel point and a tool steel chisel that I use a lot. I got a tool steel splitter. You know, I got a curved and a straight tool steel chisels. You'll find a lot of the really old ornate work, especially floral work, that's so delicate. The secret was tool steel, because they had properly tempered tools that were really delicate, really small. Tool steel's really elastic. You can take it won't sharpen as sharp and stay sharp. It's more of a job to service it, but boy, you can do some incredible work with tool steel. So, we'll set up in the next video, and we'll swipe this and get this point shot, and we'll be off to the races, because we'll have our point down low and our point up high in the middle, you know, to be able to work over, and then we can use our end points, and it should go well. My name's Clint Button. I'm a granite sculptor here at Carolina Sculpture Studio with a Virtual Stone Carving Apprenticeship. Thanks for coming in.